I married Julian 3 years ago, drawn to his quiet intensity. He watched everything. Me cooking breakfast, me reading, me sleeping. Never intrusive, never demanding. Just observing with those dark eyes, like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "You document everything," I told him once, watching him adjust his vintage camera on the kitchen counter. "But you never participate." He smiled that enigmatic smile. "Some stories need witnesses, Stella." I never understood what he meant, until today. "Let's go somewhere different," he said over coffee, his fingers drumming against the table. "The old forest road. I found a clearing last week." "A picnic?" I raised an eyebrow. Julian wasn't the spontaneous type. "Why not?" He was already reaching for his camera bag, checking lenses with practiced efficiency. "The light will be perfect this afternoon." The drive took 40 minutes through winding back roads. Julian hummed softly, one hand on the wheel, the other tapping rhythms against his thigh. I watched the trees thicken around us, civilization falling away. "Here," he said, pulling onto a barely visible dirt track. The clearing opened like a secret. Dappled sunlight filtered through ancient oaks, and moss carpeted the ground in velvet green. Julian parked and started unloading supplies, thermos, blanket, sandwiches wrapped in brown paper. "It's beautiful," I admitted, breathing in the earthy scent. "I thought you'd like it." He spread the blanket with careful precision, then positioned his camera on a nearby stump. "Perfect angle." "For what?" "The story," he said simply. "Every place needs one." I watched him work, adjusting settings, checking the view through his lens. Always the observer, never the participant. Something about his movements seemed rehearsed, like he'd done this before. "Julian? He didn't look up from the camera. "What story are you hoping to capture?" He straightened, meeting my eyes with that familiar intensity. "The one that hasn't happened yet." The forest pressed close around our small clearing, creating a pocket of intimacy in the wilderness. Julian poured tea from the thermos, steam rising between us like incense. The silence felt heavy, expectant. "I'm going for a walk," he announced suddenly, standing and brushing dirt from his jeans. "Now?" I looked at the spread of food, the careful arrangement on the soft fabric beneath us. "We just got here. I want to explore the trail markers. 20 minutes, maybe 30. He shouldered his camera bag. "You'll be fine here." "Julian." "Enjoy the quiet, Stella. Listen to the woods." He disappeared between the trees, leaving me alone with the whisper of leaves and distant bird calls. I settled back on the blanket, feeling exposed despite the canopy overhead. The clearing suddenly seemed too open, too vulnerable. Minutes passed. I sipped tea and tried to relax, but something felt wrong, orchestrated. Julian's departure was too casual, too planned. Even his camera positioning seemed deliberate, angled toward the blanket where I sat. A branch snapped somewhere to my left. I turned, expecting Julian's return, but saw nothing. Just shadows shifting in the undergrowth, playing tricks with my eyes. The forest held its breath. Another sound, closer now. Footsteps on the narrow trail that circled the clearing. "Julian?" I called out. No answer. But the footsteps continued, steady and purposeful. Someone was coming, and it wasn't my husband. I stood, smoothing my dress, suddenly aware of how isolated we were. No cell service, no other cars on that dirt road, just me and whoever was approaching through the trees. The footsteps stopped. Then a man emerged from the trail, tall, athletic, wearing cycling gear and wheeling a mountain bike. He looked surprised to see me, but his smile seemed genuine. "Sorry," he said, raising a hand in greeting. "Didn't expect anyone else out here." He was handsome in an outdoorsy way, Tanned skin, laugh lines around green eyes, dark hair damp with sweat. The kind of man who looked comfortable in his own body. "I'm lost," he admitted with a sheepish grin, propping his bike against a tree. "GPS died about 2 miles back. These trails all look the same." "I'm not much help," I said. "My husband brought me here. He knows the area better." "Husband?" His eyes flicked to the blanket, the intimate picnic setup. "Is he around?" "Exploring. He'll be back soon." I gestured toward the thermos. "Would you like some tea while you wait? You look overheated." "That's incredibly kind." He moved closer, and I caught the scent of pine and clean sweat. "I'm Marcus, by the way." "Stella." I poured the warm liquid into Julian's cup, hyper-aware of Marcus watching my movements. When I handed it to him, his fingers brushed mine. A brief contact that sent electricity up my arm. "Thank you." He took a long sip, never breaking eye contact. "This is perfect." "The tea?" "The whole scene. Beautiful woman, secret clearing, perfect afternoon." His smile was warm, inviting. "Your husband's a lucky man." Heat rose in my cheeks. "You're very direct." "Life's short. Why waste time being subtle?" He moved closer, ostensibly to set down the cup, but the space between us had shrunk to inches. I could see gold flecks in his green eyes, the way his pulse beat at his throat. "Stella?" My name sounded different in his voice, rougher, more urgent. I started to step back, but his hand caught my wrist. "Should what?" His thumb traced across my skin. "Tell me to leave?" "Yes." But I didn't move away. "Do you want me to leave?" The question hung between us like a challenge. In the distance, a bird called, sharp and wild. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for my answer. "No," I whispered. His smile was triumphant. "Good. What happened next belongs to the shadows and the moss and the secret spaces between heartbeats." His mouth found mine, urgent and demanding, and I responded with a hunger I didn't know I possessed. We sank onto the blanket together, the careful picnic forgotten. The forest became our witness, rustling leaves overhead, the scent of earth and growing things, the distant call of birds that sounded like approval. Marcus's hands mapped territories Julian had never explored, and I arched beneath his touch like I was discovering my own body for the first time. Time dissolved. There was only sensation, skin against skin, breath mingling with breath, the soft fabric beneath us and the cathedral of trees above. I forgot about Julian, forgot about consequences, forgot everything except the fire Marcus lit in my blood. Afterward, we lay tangled together, my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow to normal. The afternoon light had shifted, casting longer shadows across our makeshift bed. "I should feel guilty," I murmured against his skin. "But you don't." His fingers combed through my hair. "No, I don't." The admission surprised me with its honesty. Marcus chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. "Good. Guilt's overrated." I lifted my head to look at him. "Is this what you do? Seduce married women in the woods?" "Only the ones who want to be seduced." He traced my jawline with one finger. "Besides, I think we both know this wasn't entirely accidental." Something cold settled in my stomach. "What do you mean?" But before he could answer, footsteps approached through the trees. Julian's voice called out, casual and unhurried. "Stella, I'm back." Marcus was already moving, gathering his clothes with practiced efficiency. He dressed quickly, silently, like he'd done this before. By the time Julian appeared at the edge of the clearing, Marcus was standing beside his bike, fully clothed, looking like nothing had happened. I sat on the blanket, smoothing my dress, trying to appear normal despite the flush in my cheeks and the taste of another man still on my lips. "You found company," Julian observed mildly, taking in Marcus and his bike with those dark, assessing eyes. "He was lost," I said, proud of how steady my voice sounded. I offered him tea. Julian nodded, unsurprised. He walked to his camera, checking something on the small screen that faced away from me. His fingers moved over buttons with familiar precision. "The trails can be confusing," Julian agreed, looking at Marcus. "Did you find what you were looking for?" There was something in his tone. Not accusation, exactly, but a weight that made the question feel loaded. Marcus seemed to understand perfectly. "I did, thanks." Marcus swung his leg over the bike. "Beautiful spot you picked. Your wife's very hospitable." "She is." Julian's smile was enigmatic. "Stella has always been generous with strangers." The words hit me like ice water, always been. Like this had happened before, like he knew exactly what had transpired while he was gone. Marcus pedaled away without looking back, disappearing down the trail as suddenly as he'd appeared. Julian and I were alone again, the clearing suddenly too quiet, too intimate. "Did you enjoy your walk?" I asked, desperate to fill the silence. "Very much." Julian packed his camera carefully, methodically. I got exactly what I was hoping for. "Pictures?" "Among other things." He looked at me then, and something in his expression made my blood run cold. "How was your tea?" "Fine." I stood, brushing off the blanket with shaking hands. "We should go. It's getting late." "In a moment." Julian moved to where his camera had been positioned, angling the screen toward me. "I want to show you something first." The small display showed the clearing from above, a perfect bird's-eye view of the blanket where Marcus and I had. My stomach dropped. "Remote access," he said conversationally, touching the device in his pocket. "Started the moment I left. Amazing what technology can capture these days." The forest spun around me. Every tree, every shadow, every witness to my betrayal suddenly felt complicit in something larger and more calculated than I'd imagined. "How long have you been planning this?" Julian's smile was soft, almost tender. "Since the beginning, Stella. Since the very beginning." "You set this up." The words came out flat, emotionless. "All of it." Julian continued packing his equipment with maddening calm. "I prefer to think of it as providing opportunity." Marcus wasn't lost. Marcus is very good at what he does. Professional, discreet. He's helped me document several stories over the years. The implications hit me in waves. Several stories. Other women. Other clearings. Other carefully orchestrated betrayals captured through his lens. "You're sick." "I'm curious." Julian folded the blanket with precise movements. "You married a photographer, Stella. Did you think I'd never want to photograph you in your most authentic moments?" "Authentic?" I laughed, but it sounded broken. "You mean manipulated." "I mean free." His dark eyes held mine. "Free from the performance you give me every day. The careful wife, the considerate partner. I wanted to see who you really are when you think nobody's watching." "But you were watching. You're always watching." "That's what I do." Julian shouldered his camera bag. "I document truth. And the truth is, you enjoyed every second with Marcus. You came alive in ways I've never seen." I wanted to deny it, to rage at him, to storm away through the trees. But the words stuck in my throat because he was right. I had enjoyed it. I had felt more alive in Marcus's arms than I had in months with Julian. "What happens now?" I whispered. "Now we go home." Julian started walking toward the car. "And we talk about what this means for us." "You think I'm just going to pretend this is normal? That I'll stay married to someone who—" I struggled for words. "Who pimps out his wife for his own entertainment?" Julian stopped walking. When he turned back, his expression was softer, almost vulnerable. I think you'll stay because you finally understand what I've been trying to show you all along. You're not the woman you pretend to be, Stella. You're so much more interesting than that. He was right again, and I hated him for it. I hated him for seeing through my careful facade, for orchestrating my fall, for making me complicit in my own exposure. But mostly I hated him because part of me was already wondering when he'd arrange the next story. The drive home passed in tense silence. Julian hummed softly, fingers tapping the steering wheel, while I stared out the passenger window at the blur of trees. Every mile took us further from the clearing, but I couldn't escape the memory of what had happened there. Back at our house, Julian disappeared into his dark room while I stood in the kitchen, gripping the counter. The familiar space felt foreign now, contaminated by new knowledge. How many other photos were developing in that red-lit room? How many other stories had he captured? An hour later, he emerged with a manila envelope. Stella. His voice was gentle, coaxing. Come sit with me. I followed him to the living room where he spread the photos across our coffee table like tarot cards revealing an unwelcome future. They were artistic, beautifully composed, and devastating. Marcus and me on the soft fabric, caught in moments of abandon I barely remembered making. You're very photogenic, Julian said, settling beside me on the couch. Destroy them. Why? They're beautiful. You're beautiful in them. I picked up one photo, my face tilted back, eyes closed, completely lost in sensation. A stranger wearing my body, experiencing pleasure I'd forgotten I could feel. This isn't who I am. Isn't it? Julian's finger traced the edge of another photo. Look at yourself, really look. When have you ever been more yourself? The question hung between us like a challenge. In the photos, I looked wild, uninhibited, alive in ways I hadn't been in years. But it was a life built on lies, orchestrated by the man I'd promised to love and trust. What do you want from me, Julian? I want you to stop pretending. He gathered the photos carefully, returning them to the envelope. I want you to acknowledge what you discovered about yourself today. That you can manipulate me into betraying everything I believe in? That you're capable of passion, real passion, not the careful performance you give me in our bedroom. The words hit like a slap. Performance? Come on, Stella. We both know our sex life has been polite, scheduled, safe. Today, you were anything but safe. He was right, and the truth of it burned. Marcus had touched something in me that Julian never had. Or maybe something Julian had never been allowed to reach. So what happens now? I asked again. Julian smiled, and for the first time all day, it looked genuinely warm. Now we renegotiate. Renegotiate what, exactly? Julian poured wine, expensive red he'd been saving for special occasions. Apparently, my documented infidelity qualified. Our arrangement, our understanding of what this marriage can be. He handed me a glass. I'm not angry, Stella. I'm fascinated. By your wife sleeping with another man? By my wife finally being honest about what she wants. He settled back into his chair, completely relaxed. The question is, what do we do with that honesty? I sipped the wine, buying time. Part of me wanted to throw it in his face and walk out. But another part, the part that had come alive under Marcus's touch, was curious despite itself. You've done this before. With other women. I've explored the concept, yes, but never with someone I loved. Love? I laughed bitterly. You think this is love? I think love means seeing someone completely. All of them, not just the parts they choose to show. Julian leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. I've been watching you for 3 years, Stella. watching you hold back, play it safe, be the good wife. Today I saw who you really are. A cheater. A woman with needs she's been denying. Desires she's been suppressing. He reached across the space between us, his fingers warm against mine. I want to give you permission to explore those desires. The offer hung in the air like smoke from his cigarettes, intoxicating and dangerous. With your supervision, with my knowledge, my participation in my own way. Julian's thumb traced across my knuckles. I get to document the stories, you get to live them. And if I say no, then we go back to pretending, safe, polite, careful, and we both slowly die of boredom. I pulled my hand away, needing distance to think clearly. But even as I did, I was remembering the feel of Marcus's hands, the rush of doing something reckless and real. This is insane. Sanity is overrated. Julian smiled. Besides, you've already proven you want this. The only question is whether you're brave enough to admit it. 3 months later, I found myself in another clearing, another carefully orchestrated scenario. Julian's camera captured everything as a different stranger. This one, a hiker who'd lost his way, helped me discover new territories of desire. And afterward, when Julian and I reviewed the photos together, I had to admit the truth that terrified me most of all. I was becoming someone I barely recognized. Someone who craved the thrill of being watched, being documented, being seen in all my complicated hunger. Someone who had learned to love the story Julian was helping me write, one frame at a time. The photos spread across Julian's coffee table, like evidence of a crime I wasn't sure I wanted to confess to. Each image captured something I'd never seen in myself before. A woman unashamed, luminous with want, completely present in her own skin. The afternoon light streaming through his loft windows made them seem almost ethereal, as if we'd documented something sacred rather than scandalous. "Look at this one," Julian murmured, his finger hovering over a shot where I was caught mid-laugh, my head thrown back, completely unguarded. The stranger, Marcus he'd introduced himself later, was visible in the background, his expression one of pure appreciation. You can see the exact moment you stopped performing and started just being. I studied the image, remembering that precise instant. It was when Marcus had whispered something unexpectedly funny about the absurdity of pretending not to notice each other, and I dissolved into genuine laughter. The camera had caught me in that bubble of authenticity, and somehow Julian had managed to make it beautiful rather than vulnerable. "I look like someone else," I said softly. "No," Julian corrected, his voice gentle but certain. "You look like yourself, maybe for the first time." That evening, I found myself alone in my apartment, the familiar space feeling foreign after the day's revelations. I'd lived here for 3 years, but suddenly, every corner seemed to reflect the woman I'd been before Julian's camera had shown me who I could become. The carefully curated books on my shelves, chosen more for how they looked than what they contained. The neutral artwork that offended no one and inspired no one. The clothes hanging in my closet like costumes for a character I'd been playing without realizing it. My phone buzzed with a text from Julian. "Dinner tomorrow? I want to show you something." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. 3 months ago, I would have analyzed every word, wondered about his intentions, crafted a response that revealed nothing while saying everything. Now, I simply typed, "Yes." The restaurant Julian chose was intimate without being cliché, the kind of place where conversations happened in lowered voices and meaningful glances. He arrived before me, and I watched him through the window as I approached, the way he absently ran his fingers through his dark hair, how he studied the wine list with the same intensity he brought to composing a shot. When he looked up and saw me, his smile was immediate and uncomplicated. I've been thinking about what you said, he began after we'd ordered, his hands wrapped around his wine glass. About becoming someone you barely recognize. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. It's true. Sometimes I catch glimpses of myself in mirrors, and I'm surprised by what I see. Like I'm watching someone else's life. Is that frightening? I considered the question, rolling it around like wine on my tongue. Terrifying, I admitted. But also, liberating? It's like I've been holding my breath for years without realizing it. And suddenly, I can breathe again. Julian leaned forward, his eyes intense in the candlelight. I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. My heart quickened. Okay. Do you trust me? The question hung between us, weighted with implications I wasn't sure I was ready to examine, but the answer came without hesitation. Yes. He reached into the leather portfolio beside his chair and withdrew a single photograph. It was one I hadn't seen during our review session, a candid shot of me looking directly into the camera, my expression open and challenging and utterly unguarded. But it wasn't the image itself that made my breath catch. It was what he'd done with it. The photo had been printed on textured paper that gave it an almost painterly quality, and he'd mounted it in a simple black frame. It looked like art. It looked like something worthy of being seen. I want to submit this to a gallery show, he said quietly. It's a group exhibition about authentic intimacy, not sexual, necessarily, but emotional truth in portraiture. Your permission would mean everything to me. But more than that, I think it could mean everything to you. I stared at the photograph, seeing myself through his eyes, not as someone performing or hiding, but as someone courageously present. The woman in the image looked like she had stories to tell and wasn't afraid to tell them. People would see this? I asked. Some people. The kind of people who understand that vulnerability is its own form of strength. I thought about the version of myself who had walked into Julian's studio that first day, so carefully constructed and terrified of being truly seen. Then I thought about the woman who had laughed with a stranger in a park, who had discovered she could be desired not despite her complications, but because of them. What would you call it? I asked. Julian's smile was soft, proud, becoming. I reached across the table and touched the frame, tracing the edge with my fingertip. In the photograph, my eyes held a promise, to myself, to the world, to the possibility of being known. It was a promise I was finally ready to keep. Yes, I said, and the word felt like the beginning of everything.